How often, when receiving new utility bills, do you wonder if you're paying too much for electricity, water, or gas? And why am I required to pay my hard-earned money for garbage collection that isn't done for weeks, for cleaning the stairwell that the utility workers only pay attention to once a month, and for other unclear services? Russia's second-largest city, St. Petersburg, was first buried in snowdrifts with winter's arrival. And then, when the waste management reform began in January, it became buried in garbage, too. Then St. Petersburg City Hall cheerfully reported that the responsible parties had been fined as much as 2 million rubles. But the pile of garbage is still there. After the New Year's holidays, a thaw came to the city on the Neva. Snow piles melted into rivers along the sidewalks, which turned into an ice rink when the frost hit. Lines began forming at the trauma centers. So, regarding all this, there's a conspiracy theory that says utility services have actually already been paid for by the government. Where else but our channel should we check it out? Let's go. There are no debts for utilities because housing and utility services are included in the federal budget and have already been paid on our behalf. That's exactly the argument used by people who stopped paying those incomprehensible bills that show up in their mailbox every month. All right. Maybe there's an official document or law that confirms this theory? Yes, of course, and not just one. There were 8 resolutions on this matter, starting from 2007. They are called Resolutions on Federal Standards for Payment of Housing and Utility Services. Succeeding one another, they have continued up to the present day. We open document number 97 dated February 11, 2016 and read, "The government of the Russian Federation resolves to approve the attached federal standards for payment of housing and utilities on average across the Russian Federation for the years 2016-2018, which are applied for the purpose of determining the amount of interbudgetary transfers allocated from the federal budget to the budgets of the subjects of the Russian Federation, including for providing financial assistance for the payment of housing and utilities." So what does this mean? Funds are allocated from the federal budget of the Russian Federation, which are then distributed among administrations and municipalities. This amount already covers all housing, utility, and major repair expenses. Every square meter of residential premises across the country has been paid for. Based on this document, interbudgetary transfers are allocated to the regions, including for providing financial assistance for paying for residential premises and housing and utilities services. According to this version, the utility bills that residents receive without a stamp and the chief accountant's signature and in an unsealed form are a calculation for a cash order, an extract from the accounting balance sheet. The accounting department has already written off the amounts billed to residents for housing and utility services from this account. Collecting payments, like for the intercom, is illegal. The documents clearly state that intercom maintenance is included in the cost of housing maintenance and a separate fee is illegal. So, management companies already receive funds from the government, but that's not enough for them, and they still fleece us, as if these aren't bills, but some kind of voluntary donations. However, there's one catch to this beautiful truth. The main argument in the above-mentioned evidence comes down to accounting laws. The federal law, number 402 on accounting states, every business transaction must be documented with a primary accounting document. It is not allowed to accept for accounting documents that record business transactions that did not actually take place, including those underlying sham and fictitious deals. But these laws have nothing to do with the issue of paying for housing and utilities. For example, in a grocery supermarket, you fill your basket with goods and pay for all of it at the checkout. You receive a receipt for the purchased goods and calmly go home. In the subway, you buy a ticket for the ride and also receive, at most, a receipt. But you don't sign any contracts with the supermarket or the subway. You don't receive a document with signatures from both parties and stamps from the chief accountants. This is a simplified purchase scheme, which is also used when paying for utilities. If you apply the accounting law to buying a banana in a supermarket or buying a token in the subway, of course, it turns out that this law is being grossly violated. But why would you waste time in the store drawing up a contract and collecting signatures from different offices if there is a simplified purchase scheme? That's exactly why it exists. And for housing and utilities, there is Decree number 354, which describes in detail what the payment form for utilities should look like, and there's not a word there about accountants' signatures, stamps, and so on. The same decree also explains how to conclude a contract with the management company. It is concluded by conduct. An implied transaction occurs when the will of the parties is expressed by their actions and behaviors that clearly indicate the participants' intentions. For example, a buyer purchases groceries in a store that have been pre-sorted, or a citizen inherits and receives an apartment. He doesn't sign any papers, but he already starts moving things and rearranging furniture, which means he accepts the inheritance. All of this is conduct implying assent. If the client uses water supply or gas, or takes actions indicating his intention to use them in the future, the agreement for utility services also takes effect. That is why not a single lawsuit has been won by a citizen who based his accusation on the fact that a contract was concluded between him and the management company. Maybe, but what about the claim that the utilities have already been paid for by the government? Such a statement applies to beneficiaries. It's clear that there are categories of people for whom these funds exist. These are pensioners, low-income individuals, large families, families of military personnel, and so on. That's the bitter truth. Lots of conspiracy theories like that exist. For example, there's also the order of the Russian Ministry of Finance from December 11, 2018, number 216-159N, signed by Silwanov. Appendix number 4 lists the permitted uses of earmarked funds. Among other things, it specifies payments for utility services. This includes payment for heating, water supply, gas, and electricity. Considering that the order specifies the source of funding for these payments as earmarked federal funds, a theory has emerged that the government has already financed all utility payments for the next 3 years, for utilities up to 2021. This order also provides for the payment of salaries along with utilities. But for some reason, there's no theory that, according to this very order, we've already been paid our salaries long ago, and now we have to work for free until 2021. However, this order does not regulate the payment of utilities by individuals. It was created for Treasury support and oversight of organizations executing government contracts. And there's also a conspiracy theory called the Currency Code. In 2019, the courts issued a large number of decisions on this issue. Citizens demanded that utility bills be declared illegal because the currency code 810 was indicated on the bill. Whereas since 2004, the all-Russian currency classifier has designated the Russian ruble with the code 643. Meanwhile, all the court cases were lost because the accounting rules for credit organizations still require the use of the ruble code 810 for ruble transactions. And at the same time, no one has repealed Article 153 of the Housing Code of the Russian Federation, which requires full and timely payment for utilities by property owners and tenants. As judicial practice shows, believing in such pseudo-theories leads to nothing good. Citizens are charged not only for overdue housing and utility payments, but also penalties and all court costs. As a result, there may be a freeze on your bank card, a travel ban, loss of the right to a subsidy, sale of property at auction, and so on. The law also provides for the eviction of utility debtors from municipal housing if they do not pay rent for more than 6 months. But there is another interesting question that can't be dismissed as a housing and utilities conspiracy theory. Where do the billions collected for major repairs go? Back in 2012, 10 years ago, a new line appeared in Russians' utility bills. Major repairs. Residents of apartment buildings are required to pay for it. The fee is set by regional authorities. In Moscow, in 2021, the minimum contribution was just under 20 rubles per square meter. In Leningrad Oblast, it's 8 rubles in Yekaterinburg, 10 rubles. Every year, tens or even hundreds of billions of rubles are deposited into the accounts of regional capital repair funds. For example, in 2013, it was 97 billion, in 2016, 142 billion, and in 2020, 150 billion rubles. And of course, these funds are far from always being spent as intended. Here are just some of the news headlines related to these billions. In early April 2021, The Audit Chamber of St. Petersburg stated that the city's capital repair fund spent 1.4 billion rubles in violation of the rules. In particular, it spent the money collected from St. Petersburg residents on bonuses, office rent at an inflated price, and in 2018 in Kirov, the prosecutor's office discovered that the local capital repair fund had misused funds totaling 2.4 million rubles. In the same year, 2018, the General Prosecutor's Office found, just think about it, 12,700 violations in the area of capital repairs, announcing the initiation of 105 criminal cases. And that's only what made it into the media. The largest capital repair market in Russia is in the Moscow region. The expenses of the Moscow Regional Capital Repair Fund are more than 20 billion rubles a year. The schemes for embezzling the fund's money are surprisingly simple. For example, acceptance certificates list work that was never actually done. A classic trick is to write in the documents that scaffolding was installed for repairs, since it's dismantled before inspection anyway, or to overstate the amount of work done. For example, the stated square meters of facade work, which hardly anyone will recalculate. Or, for example, a government construction expert might also work as an estimator in a private contractor's office at the same time. And in February 2021, the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service of the Moscow region announced a collusion between the Regional Capital Repair Fund and the administrations of 21 municipalities, including Balashikha, Odintsovo, Mytishchi, Naro-Fominsk, Khimki, Sergiev Posad, and others. In total, more than 24 billion rubles were deposited into the company's accounts during the period of possible collusion. What do you think about all this? Write in the comments. That's all for today. Thank you for watching and for giving this video a fair rating. See you on Cremola.